Good evening and welcome back to Jones & Company. I'm your host, Brian Jones. Today I'm joined by Christian Jones.
Thank you, Brad.
Yes. And we're talking labor with labor leaders in the country. So on this final segment, which is also brought to you by the TUC, we have with us Mr. Arlington Bethel. He's the chairman of the TUC, and he's also, he's the chairman of the Labor Day Preparations and Planning Committee of the TUC, right? And we also have with us Mr. Sloan Smith. He's the first vice president of the TUC, and he's the president of the Bahamas Customs Immigration Allied Workers Union.
Correct.
As well. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes. A big week indeed. And so a return to the road, right? Physical parade.
Yes, sir.
Right. So how's your planning coming together in the preparations?
We're making good, steady progress. We are scheduled to be at Windsor Park on June 3rd at 7:30 a.m. We hope to get an early start at 8 a.m. And we're asking for all our affiliates to be there early, on time. We will proceed north on East Street to Bay Street, and from Bay Street to Arwaki, where we are expected to have a fun day, family fun day, where we'll have a number of activities going on. We'll have some hoopla, we'll have some bouncing castle for the kids, face painting, popcorn station, snow cones, that kind of thing. So we ask for parents to come out and enjoy, bring the kids out, and they can have a fun day. We'll have free food for the kids as well. Right. So during that parade, we ask that when we get to that point where we had that tragedy some years ago, we'll have a moment of silence and we will have a laying of wreath during that period. We're also going to be managing this parade a little different. We have all of our affiliates identifying marshals to ensure that drivers on the vehicles are not consuming alcohol and they're driving responsibly. We were not going to tolerate any littering on the route during the parade. And we're going to just make sure that we're managing it safely and have a good progressive parade.
Right, so all your affiliates are invited to participate.
All of them.
And you have a grouping of what, 38?
Something like that.
Unions,
we have a number of members. We're also asking the general public to come out.
Right.
We also want persons to come out with the Bahamian flag and show them off.
Do you have an indication how big this year's parade is going to be?
Boy, not yet, but I think we're going to get a very good response. And we're also, keeping in contact with the Ministry of Health and the protocols. We've already gotten approvals, but we know how the dynamics of that can change, so we will be guided by the protocols as well.
Right. So, Mr. Sloan, this is a very symbolic march, right? Help the Bahamian people understand why are you marching? Why is this march happening? Right?
To put it in context, I just need to refer to last year. We couldn't march. And the terrible thing about that is you don't have an economy truly without labor. So when you have a government who took every effort to prevent the workers of the country from marching in a sacred day, what's more powerful than Labor Day? I remember going out by the stadium and waiting, knowing full well there was a possibility we could have been arrested had we started to march. That was not a good look. And now, in a new period, we have a prime minister who said he is for labor. In fact, in signing the MOU, he took a public position. I support you, the workers. Other people had the opportunity to do the same, He was the only one who decided he would sign it and he'd stick with it. And I'd take it back even to right prior to the election. In the House of Labor, he said some things to me from the customs and immigration perspective. I asked the question, Prime Minister, in the immigration department, there is no body who has come through the system. We have somebody sitting here who did not come through the immigration system. Came in through contract, and as a consequence, we need you, Prime Minister, to show some confidence in the immigration officers and appoint somebody to be an immigration director who came through the ranks. You know what he said? You can trust my word. Today we have a director, a female director, Ms. Katura Ferguson, and a cadre of persons who came through the ranks. So when he said you could take his word for it, I believe him when he says it. And like I told the chief, Sophie Ferguson, we with the prime minister. The fact that he's with workers, we with him. If you for me, I for you.
Hello.
But let me go a little further in terms of what we are seeking to achieve even now. Our contract has been expired, and so the government promised in the MOU that they will seek to bring those contracts to a conclusion. And I believe him. I believe the prime minister.
Okay. Yeah. So you have a lot of traction. You do have a lot to be marching for.
Of course,
right?
of course. That's a reasonable thing to do. The fact that he's willing to do that, the workers are willing to support the MOU, yeah, we're going to march. We're looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so focus has to be on the workers, right?
Has to be. What else is there? It can't be that governments come in to look after themselves.
Right.
It's the people.
Right. And regarding the march itself, is there any concerns with how you're going to manage COVID, the COVID precautions?
Again, we will be guided by the health protocols later by the Ministry of Health, and we will follow those to the hilt.
Right, right. So you'll be giving out masks and things.
We will be giving out definitely hand sanitizers. We're
Hand
trying to
sanitizer.
secure some masks as we speak
Okay.
to do the same.
Right,
So
right.
we will be following the protocols.
Understood, understood.
And Mr. Smith, you're the first vice president of the TUC.
I am.
So that means in Mr. Ferguson's absence, you're acting president.
I think that's true.
All right, well, in his absence, I want to ask you this question.
And he's sitting right there.
What is the continuing relevance of the labor movement in the 21st century
21st
Bahamas?
century
When we
Bahamas.
look back at it in terms of the general strike, the Burma Road riot, all of those things that have led to this continuous dispensation of majority rule and more expansion for Bahamians.
Yeah, the
What do you
continuous-
think is the
I
continuing
don't really know
relevance?
that we have the time to talk about that in depth, but let me just point to a period in history. In the 1930s, you'll find it in the Caribbean. They had this massive unrest. That translated even into the Bahamas in 1942 with the Burma Road riot, right? And we saw coming out of that the Moyne Commission. England sent persons here to figure out why these people were unhappy in this environment. And so what was the issue? The workers in these environments in the Caribbean were being treated totally unfairly. All right? We talk about the concept of decent work. Decent work deals with fair pay for the amount of work you're given, safe working environments, and the kind of employment that has relevance. That's what we're dealing with here. If you do not have, or rather, let me put it this way, the relevance of it, do we wish to go back to slavery? Because the employer left unchecked is the equivalent of what?
Slave master.
Slave work. The legislations reflected it. You could have beat the workers. You could have killed the workers. And it was okay, you know. Why?
legal.
Because the employer and the politician tend to have been one and the same. So the workers need something like this. So the relevance of labor today, and will continue to be this way all through, I guess, perpetuity. We need somebody to be a buffer between the employer and the worker. And I suggest it's the union. So we are quite relevant.
In terms of, we spoke earlier about developing more productivity to meet with wages, I believe. When we look at it, the government, to a large extent, because of a lack of capital injections in the business sector, becomes that employer of last resort.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of pressure put on the government, and then you have a situation where trade unions and the labor movement are often going to war with the government.
Yeah. With productivity, if you look in the public sector, I represent both customs and immigration. Let me hasten to say before I answer that the government promised in the MOU to deal with promotions even in immigration and customs, so we've begun that process. But in terms of productivity, if you look at the evaluation that is done every year for customs and immigration staff, and even the wider public service, there's a component in there that deals with initiative, quantity, quality of work, the whole 9 yards, right? The point is, in there is that component that measures your working ability. And if you don't work, what it says is this: do you recommend that they get an increment? You could say no if they didn't. So I wouldn't suggest sitting here that concept of productivity is not within that. It is quite in there. And so It's simply up to the leaders, the supervisors to do their jobs. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I want to thank you for sharing all of that information, that insight with us. Thanks for also explaining everything that's happening this week with the Labor Day March. I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to it.
Yes.
And also looking forward to honoring the memory of those
Yes.
who unfortunately who things went the wrong way a couple of years ago. So yes, we want to thank you for sharing and spending time with us today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
so this episode of Jones & Company was brought to you by the TUC. We thank you for joining us. Happy Labor Day.